this is my final for Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies. So my final, I researched the effects of media on young people, particularly children and teenagers, and how that with classical conditioning enforces patriarchal ideals. So I have some quotes like throughout this presentation. I'm using this on Notion because when I tried to put it in a slideshow, it was just really ugly. So yeah, I have quotes in pink are from my own research, which I'll submit the link that I used to the Google form when I turn this in. But these are all like direct quotes from people who have filled out the Google form, and quotes in blue are from external sources. So yeah. So first we're going to talk about classical conditioning. In this presentation we're looking at everything through kind of this viewpoint of classical conditioning and how we take in information that way. According to the National Institute of Health, it's the most straightforward way that we take in information, so it's the most common. And it just involves any reaction to an external stimulus. It's pretty simple. So sometimes the reaction is going to be intrinsic, like when you look at food and you get hungry. So the other times it's going to be external. So if you see something and someone you know says that they don't like that or they think that that's bad or whatever, you're going to come to associate that thing with a negative connotation. So this is going to be more the reaction that we're looking at in this presentation is that of the external stimulus. So we're going to start with talking about children's media and how it enforces gender roles at an age where children are most susceptible to classical conditioning. When they're very young, they don't really have that nuanced perspective that we come to expect in adults, so they pretty much, just take in information as it's given to them. In media created for children, such as television shows, gender roles are pretty strictly enforced. According to a study done by Common Sense, ages 2 through 6 are when children first learn their gender identity. They learn stereotypes about their gender, and they begin gender-typed play. So, like little girls will play with baby dolls, and little boys will play with trucks and things like that. And then at ages 7 to 10, children begin to associate certain jobs and traits with gender, and they begin to self-segregate based on gender. So, like little girls will go play with little girls, and little boys will go play with little boys. And then associating certain traits and jobs, like little girls will associate themselves with kindness and with being like a teacher or a nurse or a mom or things like that. And boys will associate themselves with being like police officers or, things like that. So this quote from Common Sense, it says, fast forward to teen and tween years, characters begin to wrestle with, other things. I'm doing this on my school Chromebook, so some things have to get censored out. And job prospects. So traits that they see in characters when they're younger, like being strong and brave or being meek or being kind or things like that, they kind of tend to change. So someone that's strong and brave is going to become aggressive and hostile, and someone who's fearful and meek is going to become submissive, and that kind of just enforces patterns of abuse and domestic things that women are disproportionately affected by. In the study, 59.2% of parents surveyed were concerned that boys and kids' TV shows were portrayed as violent or aggressive. And women are also heavily underrepresented in children's TV shows. The ratio of male to female characters is about 2 to 1, which is kind of crazy to think about. So, in some of the most common shows that little kids would be watching, like Paw Patrol, there's 5 little boy dogs and 1 little girl dog. And in SpongeBob, there's 4 main characters that are boys and 1 who's a girl. And these are both made for children of both genders, so these aren't specifically made for boys. And then this quote is from my research that someone submitted. She says, the underrepresentation of female characters in children's media is very concerning. It made it hard as a child to find myself represented because there was no one who looked or acted like me on TV. And then in a different Common Sense study, in 2015, it outlines how much body representation has to do with the development of children, especially women. So in the study, 75% of children associated thinness with positive traits like kindness, and 87% of female characters in ages 10 to 17 in a study of 134 episodes of popular kids television shows were depicted as underweight. when adjusted for human-sized proportions. And then in a study that observed the behaviors of children before and after Western media was introduced, they took like a rural community that hadn't been exposed to TV, to Western ideals, to anything like that. And then in the before and after it was introduced, 75% of the young girls felt too big or too fat after being introduced to this media. And in a study of over 500 teen girls, in the study, I can't pronounce either of their names, they identified direct relationships between sexually objectifying media and the internalization of beauty ideals. And in kids media, there's a significant difference in how women are portrayed in media that is made for little boys and little girls. So in little girls media, women, they're usually thin and they have features associated with kindness, like the thinness that we talked about, but they're also relatively covered up. Most of them are pretty modest. So you'll see in these three different, this is My Little Pony, which was really popular when I was a kid, and Barbie, of course, and Disney princesses. Oh no. And then in boys media, they usually appear older. There's more emphasis on the hips and the chest, and they have more exposed skin. So I think this is from El Dorado, this one's from Hercules, and this one is from Atlanta. So these are all still movies being made for boys who are probably around 8. So still very young before they really even have an idea of like sex or things like that. There's also differences in how heroic women, or like damsels in distress or whatever, look, and female villains in children's media. Female villains have more undesirable traits. They have long noses. They're usually, a lot of them are portrayed as overweight, and they have rounder features. This is like from Disney movies. This is Ursula and the evil queen from Snow White. So also the Bechdel test, which I'm sure you've heard of. Another way that media conditions women is by how much they physically speak in movies. So just not how they look, but also what they say as well. So according to Merriam-Webster, the Bechdel test is a set of criteria used as a test to evaluate a work of fiction on the basis of its inclusion and representation of female characters. So the 3 rules are very simple. A movie has to have 2 women with names in it. The women must speak to each other about something that is not a man. I think that it can be like a man, but it just cannot be like someone that they're romantically involved with, basically. So it's very surprising how few movies and TV shows pass this test, especially those catered towards little boys. So as you can see, this is like movies that don't have any of the 3, and then 1 of the 3 rules, 2 of the 3, and 3 of the 3. So it's only like just a little bit above half of movies that pass the Bechdel test. And this is from the Bechdel Institute. So they survey hundreds of thousands of movies and TV shows. So this is a very large data pool that this comes from. But the funny thing is that movies catered toward little girls almost always pass the reverse Bechdel test. So they almost always have 2 named male characters that talk to each other about something other than a girl. Almost every Barbie movie, almost every Disney princess movie passes the reverse Bechdel test. Even in movies that are marketed toward little girls, men do most of the talking. So men have 71% of the lines in The Little Mermaid and 59% in Frozen, which are like some of the biggest movies catered toward little girls. Another thing to talk about is clothing. So little girls' clothing is made to be flimsier and not as play-friendly and more decorative than little boys' clothing. And this is coming from a New York Times article. It's also a lot more revealing, despite the fact that little boys and little girls, until they're about 6 years old, their bodies look exactly the same. But clothes made for little girls are almost always more revealing. And so the message here is that little girls are meant to decorate and not to do. So here I have some pictures. These are pulled straight from like Walmart and Target and Amazon.com. So here's little boy's clothing. They have like, he has a dinosaur in his shirt, and that one, and he has a shark. And then these are for little girls. So this one has like a bunny and a mouse, and I've seen like a lot of cats and things like that too. So the motifs on children's clothing are very different. Boys usually have predators, so sharks, dinosaurs, lions, and girls have prey, which are like kittens, mice, deer, bunnies, things like that. And the message there, I think, is pretty interesting when you think about it. Also, many figures on little girls' clothes have closed eyes. So this is in like one page of shirts from Target, and they have closed eyes, all these animals. And see, even Yoda, which is primarily made for little boys, but on this little girl's shirt, his eyes are closed. And Minnie Mouse. And this is training to be more submissive. So also a big thing that we can't not talk about when it comes to media and how we raise little girls is eating disorders. This is a quote from my research. It says, "It really angers me that many adults see this as normal and all right because it's better for guys to find girls attractive than for women to be healthy." The way that media is presented to young girls can have real health effects. This is like we talked about in the study earlier, before and after they introduced the little girls to Western media, where after that 3/4 of them said that they felt too fat. And this is like, these are a rural community, so these are mostly very fit girls. So 90% of anorexia patients are female. So this is another system that affects women disproportionately. And the study says 81% of 10-year-olds are afraid of gaining weight at 10 years old. The same classical conditioning that leads girls into patterns of eating disorders also leads them to stay in those patterns. So in this quote from research, I was starving myself and all anyone told me was how good I lived. Okay, so now we're talking about transitioning into media in teenage years and what I like to call the twilight effect, which is where basically anything that teenage girls seem to like, men hate for whatever reason. So this is a quote from Charlie Kirk, who is a podcast host. And again, there's some censored things here because this is on my Chromebook. So this is talking about Taylor Swift. This was very recently, this is like 2 months ago. Taylor Swift is going to come out in the presidential election and she's going to mobilize her fans, uses air quotes. He says, "I'll be nice. And we're going to be like, oh wow, where did all these young female voters come from?" It's a really good thing that young women are voting. He says, "I think she put up one voter registration link and she registered millions and millions. And let's just be honest, all the Swifties want is swift abortion." So we love it when men discourage young women from voting. It's my favorite. So it's no secret that men hate Twilight, which is the first big example of this. So here's some other things that they also seem to hate that teenage girls love. So this is all straight from TikTok, and these are screenshots of videos that have been like on my For You page and things like that. So I'm not going to read these out loud, but you know, here we go. So here we have Taylor Swift, obviously. We have Justin Bieber, of course, and they're hating on women who read. Reading's very bad. And Lana Del Rey. And there's so many examples of this. Here's some quotes too. This person says, "Swift's inability to write a decent song being called out by a man who's been in the industry for 72 years speaks volumes to how inept Swift is at writing." This one says, "Not only does Swift make lackluster music, she is also a shrewd businesswoman." And this person, Ben Shapiro, in a 43-minute rant about the Barbie movie, says, it makes me viscerally angry. I can't imagine why. However, women rarely have the same response to things that mainly men like. So football, golf, I literally couldn't think of anything else. I guess like hunting, things like that. So here's what women have to say about the Twilight effect. This young adult author says, "For many people, the fact that teenage girls like something, whether that is something is Taylor Swift or One Direction or Twilight, is a reason to write it off completely." And men also love to say that Taylor Swift fans are in a cult. So, yeah, that's what I think about that. So the SEC fined the University of Tennessee $100,000 because their fans rushed the field and broke the goalpost. I can't imagine how you do that, but it will also cost $150,000 to replace the goalpost torn down by Tennessee fans. So, yeah, their hobbies are. So, the point. So, classical conditioning, this is a quote from Taylor Swift that I think, in this quote she is talking about an eating disorder that she had, or that she developed as a result of people in the media specifically scrutinizing her. And she says, my relationship with food was exactly the same psychology that I applied to everything else in my life. If I was given a pat on the head, I registered that as good. If I was given a punishment, I registered that as bad. And that's exactly how classical conditioning works with all these things that we've been talking about. So in classical conditioning, external stimuli influences how we react to and view certain things. It's reasonable to say that the media is driving home the point that women or things associated with being a woman are bad, and things associated with being a man are good. Therefore, it's also reasonable to say that this conditioning, starting from a very young age, has lasting effects on both women and men. According to a study by the University of California, most of our personalities are set by first grade. So that's, 7, 8 years old, maybe younger. And so, since that's true, it's impossible to say how deeply the media we consume in our childhoods affects us, and also how aware we are of how much it has affected us. So media we consume as adolescents, particularly children, contributes heavily to our idea of gender and also keeps our patriarchal ideals enforced. So, yeah, thank you.